Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about functional behavior assessment. So anytime I'm presented with a behavior, whether it's a maladaptive behavior or a behavior for skill acquisition, I mean, how many times you guys come into work and maybe someone had a rough day yesterday or something and they're telling you about a problem behavior that may have happened, or you're working with someone and you notice the skill deficit and you want to help build that skill up and improve their lives. Well, the very first step you should take is a functional behavior assessment. And this assessment should be an ongoing approach to behavior treatment. So it's a process that happens at the very beginning, but it's also a process that should be ongoing, that we never ever stop doing functional behavior assessments. We always want to see where we're at with the VIPs so that we could see where we could take things with our interventions. So we're going to talk about a couple steps we take with a functional behavior assessment, and we're going to get into it. I appreciate any feedback or questions you might have, so please just raise your hand if you have a question. So let's get into it. So these are the types of assessment that we'll be discussing today. Well, not all three, but two of them mainly: indirect functional assessment and direct functional assessment. And there's a third type, which is the functional analysis that is mainly only performed by a trained BCBA or a trained BCABA. So we are really going to focus on the indirect and the direct functional assessment today. And like I said, what we mean by assessment is we're just trying to figure out why behaviors are happening and how things are right now with this VIP, how things are right now, or the baseline, right? So anytime I'm presented with a behavior, whether it's for skill acquisition or maladaptive, I want to do this assessment and I want to see how things are right now. And I want to see why someone's engaging in a behavior, perhaps, especially if it's a maladaptive behavior. All right, let's continue. So why FBA? Why do we do this FBA approach? Well, it determines the function of the behavior of concern. When we know the function of a behavior or why a behavior is happening, we could dictate interventions that may compete with the problem behavior. And a lot of times there's skill acquisition. Can someone tell me maybe we would put an intervention in place to have someone communicate as a way to kind of communicate their needs instead of a problem behavior? So we would determine why a behavior is happening so we could kind of come up with a skill acquisition goal that we could put in place to help our VIPs. And that's exactly what the next one is. Interventions based on FBA may be more effective than those selected without considering the function of behavior or behavioral function. It's ongoing, like I previously mentioned. We never stop this process. So even when we have a plan in place, even when we're working with the VIP for a very long time, we still are conducting FBAs ongoingly. We're going to be able to gather baseline information. So as I mentioned earlier, how behaviors are occurring right now, how often they're occurring, what the behaviors look like. And so we could then compare it to when we put interventions in place, because we want to see if we actually made an improvement from this baseline phase. And then we're also, during this FBA, going to consider the antecedents that are in place, obviously the behavior, and then the consequences, or what's maintaining or reinforcing these behaviors. Okay, I forgot about this slide. So this is just an example. Thomas biting. This is Thomas Jefferson, I believe, right? Yeah, I remember Brandon saying something about Ben. So we get called into a case to work with Thomas Jefferson, and he's engaging in some biting behavior, so pretty serious behavior. And we don't want to go in and start dictating interventions right away. We don't want to go in and say, hey, this is what should be done, because people can engage in behaviors for all kinds of reasons, and we may have dealt with a person that engaged in this kind of behavior in the past, but they could be engaging in this behavior for a totally different reason that we need to kind of uncover and do some investigatory work. So what if Thomas is engaging in biting to get items? And how would our interventions be different if he was biting to escape demand? So what if he was engaging in biting to get items? What could our interventions look like for Thomas Jefferson? Okay, so we would have this extinction protocol where if he engages in biting, we're gonna say no items are going to be delivered to Thomas, right? And we figured out through this FBA process that he does not, that he engages in this behavior to receive items. That's typically what happens. That could be a strategy we implement. Thinking about teaching Thomas a new skill or something that Thomas can already do, what may we want to teach him? Yes, very good from everyone. I think we want to teach Thomas to be able to make a communicative response to gain access to an item, right? That would be a great strategy for Thomas that we could teach him, so that it makes the problem behaviors useless, right? Because when I could request an item, think about how biting, maybe I get a buffet of possible things I need at that time. Staff are wondering, do I need a drink? Do I need food? Do I need a break, right? But if we teach Thomas to communicate, we're teaching him to gain access to that specific item that he needs. Much more powerful than the effects of a bite, perhaps, in Thomas's case. Okay, how would it be different? How would our interventions be different if he was biting and then the result was he escaped the demand? We ask him to do some extra work at the end of the day. He's engaging in biting behavior, and we determine it's to escape this demand. Go ahead. Okay, what kind of an alternative? Okay, something that he will like to do. So maybe like that break, we're going to give him a break and make that break awesome by giving him something that he loves to do, right? Yeah. And thinking on our communicative response, what could we teach Thomas in this case? Yeah, we could teach him to say, hey, Thomas, I know you're getting overwhelmed. I can see you're having some trouble here. If you need to take a break, please ask me and I will deliver upon that. And we want to consider Thomas's skills, right? Thomas can speak and everything like that. So we want to consider what he's already good at and build off that. I read when I was developing this PowerPoint a couple months ago in August. The laws of behavior are almost as certain as the laws of gravity, which is really cool. And we're going to be, while we're doing this assessment process, I always tell all my staff to use an ABC data recording sheet, right, Sue? Yep. We want to make sure that we are collecting the ABCs of behavior, which is the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So as soon as I go out and start working with a VIP, I'm giving them the ABC data recording sheets. I'm ensuring right off the bat that they are collecting ABC data. It's going to help me determine the function of a behavior. It's going to show me a baseline about how often it's happening now, so that when I put in, so that I could develop interventions, number one, but then also when I teach the whole team to do the interventions, I could compare the data to see if my interventions actually had an impact on the behavior that we're working on. Whether it's to increase asking for a specific item or to decrease the biting. I want to see what kind of impact my interventions have on this behavior. Any questions about why FBA? And could you imagine us going into a case and just giving interventions with no FBA being conducted? How often will we miss the mark with interventions? All the time. And we'd waste a lot of time. We'd waste a lot of times. So this needs to be an ongoing process, like I mentioned before. We're always collecting ABC data. We're always determining the function of the behavior, and we're always seeing how things are happening now so that we could continue to improve in the future. Any questions so far? All right, so let's get into the steps of the FBA. I like when that happens. So the number one step, we're going to gather information with indirect and direct assessments. And I'll tell you guys what that is in a few moments. 2, we're going to interpret information from the observations and from the assessments that we're conducting. 3, we're going to create a hypothesis statement why the behaviors are happening. And then 4, we're going to develop interventions based on the function of the problem behavior. Any questions? So the first thing we want to do is conduct an indirect assessment. And an indirect assessment is just our structured interview forms, our checklists, our rating scales, our record reviews. So when we're getting ISPs, reviewing ISPs, that is part of an indirect assessment. Questionnaires, and even just talking to someone. When the staff approach you or when you guys are talking about a behavior on the floor, it is an indirect assessment. You are gathering indirect information from someone else. And what do they say about that kind of information? That indirect information, that we didn't observe it ourselves, but we're hearing it through another means, or we're gathering it through this process of interviews or questionnaires. Yes, we want to use that information. We want to consider that information, but I'm going to think of it as very unreliable in nature. And you guys know about witnesses in the courtroom. Are they very reliable? Right, and I think there was tests and experiments done to kind of show that there's a lot of information lost in this process, right? So this information is very good, and the idea is that we're going to start off with a lot of broad information. We're going to gather a lot of broad information at first, and as we continue down the FBA process, we're going to slowly narrow it down. We're going to slowly narrow it down. So when I conduct these indirect assessments, I'm realizing the information is very unreliable. I'm realizing that I need to do more. I need to delve into this behavior more than what is provided from this indirect method. And no BSC or anyone should develop interventions based on this process alone. If a staff approaches you with behaviors, what should you do next after you gathered information from them? Yes, you should say, hey, when are these behaviors occurring? When can I go out and see it for myself? I need to experience this for myself. I need to see it for myself. And the other thing is too, I'm going to hand them an ABC data recording sheet, and I'm going to have them fill out baseline data for me about this behavior. And I'm going to start my collection that way and my evaluation that way. Any questions about indirects? So indirects are just methods that we're gathering information from not observing it ourselves. Very important, but we're not going to just do this and be done. And we're not just going to do this and develop interventions based upon it, because it's very unreliable and we're going to miss the mark. Okay. Here's an example of 2 of the many indirect assessments. And this is our QABF, or questions about behavior functioning, that we tend to do in our assessment package when we go out and work with a VIP and their family. And we're having them rate about challenging behaviors here. And this rating scale might give us an idea about why behaviors are happening, questions about behavior functioning. And then we have a more open-ended example here, which is the functional behavior assessment form, assessment interview form, where we're going to find out more open-ended questions, information from open-ended questions. There's many more than these 2. These are just kind of the 2 main ones that we use in our work. But we could use any ones we want. There's the MASS, FAST. There's a ton of other assessments we may use in our work. And you know, sometimes as the BSC starts to know the VIP, spend a lot of time with them, they may go back to this form themselves and fill it out about why behaviors are happening. And it might give them some insight to why behaviors are happening. You know, sometimes it's very easy to determine behavior function. Other times it is not. And if I ask you why you guys engage in certain behaviors, you guys probably, I might hear from you guys, I don't know. right? I'm not sure why I engage in that behavior. So our VIPs, aren't always reliable in telling us why they're engaging in behaviors. Go ahead.
It's worth noting too that some behaviors have more than one function.
Sure.
That's important to know too. Then that'll also be dependent on what intervention strategy.
And I think the research shows about 40% of problem behaviors have dual functions, have more than one function. So great point. So these are just indirect methods. Let's continue, please. These are just other examples of indirect assessments.
I think it's just, is it supposed to say like why they use them?
Yeah, it's from the Coover book. And these are just some other indirect assessments. If you can't see it well, check it out on your computers. And it's going to give some ideas about what kind of functions they assess for and what the format is for these. And so these are just some more examples of indirect assessments that we may utilize. Sorry for the crude picture. Direct assessments encompasses direct observation of behavior under naturally occurring situations. So ABC data recording, we mentioned that. If I have the staff fill out an ABC data sheet and they hand it to me, that is indirect to me. But if I am observing it with my own eyes and fill it out, that is direct. Continuous recording ABA. So we're going to try to capture every instance of the problem behavior. There's also ABC narrative recording. We could give someone a notebook or a piece of paper and write a paragraph or a little narrative about the behavior. And the scatter plot recording is another example. And I think we will show an example of these. Pretty much a direct observation, direct assessment is when I go out and directly observe the behaviors of concern. I'm going out to figure out why behaviors are happening for myself with my own eyes. And I'm going to also see how often it's happening now. I'm going to see what the baseline is. Let's continue. So these are two direct assessments, and these are for when I'm out there. I'm collecting this information for myself to evaluate. These are direct assessments. So here we have a scatter plot, and the scatter plot just tells me when problem behaviors are happening. So I have behaviors happening at 9, 9:30, 10 here on this day, 9 and 10:30. Why would this information be useful to me? Right, so I could do what?
Go visit them during that time.
Exactly. Hey, I'm not going to go from 11 to 12, right? I'm going to go from 9 to 10:30, and I'm going to see behaviors occurring in the natural environment. I'm not going to go and behave when problem behaviors are not occurring. I need to see the behavior for myself. I need to go out and see and experience the behaviors for myself. And then we have the ABC data sheet, which is a little different from probably what you guys see, but still the same information. We're collecting antecedent, behavior, and consequence. Antecedents evoke behavior, and then the consequences maintain behavior through reinforcement. So this information is very valuable for us when we're developing intervention strategies. Any questions so far? So we talked a lot about the indirect. We talked about the direct assessment. Now we've gathered all that. Do you guys have any questions about either indirect or direct assessments? Does it make sense? We kind of start off with this indirect. We're gathering a lot of information. Now we figured out when behaviors are happening. We have an idea about what behaviors we're interested in looking for when we're out with the VIP. And now we're going to, then we go out and we see the behaviors for ourselves. We experience it. We're recording data ourselves. We're seeing the behavior for ourselves. We're seeing the contingencies in place when we see problem behaviors. Now we gathered all that information. Now it's time to sit down and come up with a hypothesis statement. So we're interested in the function of the behavior, or why behaviors are happening. And we might see terms like socially mediated positive reinforcement as a hypothesis statement for Thomas's biting behavior. What does that mean? I hear a lot of people say positive reinforcement. What does that mean to you guys?
Trying to gain something, whether it's attention, an activity.
So we're thinking about the consequence here when we're talking about a hypothesis statement. We're thinking about the consequence here. And when I say positive, what do I mean by that? Yeah, that something is added to the environment. Think of it like a math problem. Positive means something's added to the environment, and reinforcement means that behavior will continue into the future. It'll make it more likely to continue into the future. So when I, as a consequence for a behavior, someone tells a joke and I provide them attention in the form of laughter, that's something added to the environment as a consequence. So I would say that's positive, something added. So if we consider that, what do we think negative is? Yes, taking away something, which could be effective. If I'm dealing with an adversive situation and we come in, hey buddy, you could ask for a break. And they ask for a break, I'm going to take that adversive situation away. And they're going to like that. They could like that, right? So that could be a reinforcing action for them. If they have homework, they have 100 math problems to do, they start complaining, buddy, only do one or two, and you could be done. They do one or two, and I'm taking that math away or whatever it is. So that's negative. That could be a negative reinforcement. It's definitely negative, but we don't know if it's reinforcing or not. But that's something to talk about later. Socially mediated or automatic? What does that mean? Okay. Anyone else? Perhaps. It could be. Doesn't always have to be. What is socially mediated? I think that's kind of the easier thing to think about first.
I feel like, so it's lunchtime, so everyone stops what they're doing and goes and has lunch. So that's social, like everyone's doing it.
Nice thought. Not quite. I like that though. What do we think about socially mediated when we're thinking about a consequence?
Somebody else.
Is doing what?
Helping them with something.
What was it?
Doing something for us or providing something. You need somebody else to have it be reinforcing.
Are they adding or taking away from stimuli?
Whatever you'd like. And what did you say, Deanna?
Same thing that Brandon did at the exact same time.
So socially mediated means that reinforcement needs to be delivered through someone else. So when I'm at the restaurant, I talk to the waiter or the waitress, and they bring me what I need. That's a socially mediated behavior. I have to go through someone else to access reinforcement. Right? I have to go through someone else to access reinforcement. Attention is always socially mediated. Can't kind of get attention on can't kind of provide myself attention. I mean, let's not delve into that too much. I didn't think that far ahead. So we have that socially mediated idea that reinforcement's delivered through someone else. So whether I'm getting an item, whether I'm getting attention, or when something adversive is being removed, someone else needs to do that for me. And that's a socially mediated behavior. So what is an automatically reinforced behavior then?
Like scratching an itch, something that you can do for yourself.
So reinforcement's delivered
By yourself.
Yeah, by yourself, on your own. If it was too bright in here and let's not get confused. If it was too bright in here and I would shut off the lights and the lights would go off, that's reinforcement that I delivered on my own. That's automatic. The behavior itself that I did led to reinforcement. So that's an automatically reinforced behavior. And I see people get confused on this idea with their hypothesis statements when I review their treatment plans. Socially mediated behaviors, reinforcements delivered through someone else. Automatic reinforced behaviors are behaviors that we contact reinforcement by just doing the behavior ourselves. Go ahead.
Right, so I was just gonna say, so automatic, you said turn off the light, but the socially mediated is you guys getting the blinds.
Yes, right.
Alright.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, so like you guys complaining about the blinds, that was the behavior. The result was we got blinds, right? So socially mediated behavior. And then we get the blinds, and then the world's like, we're going to have a cloudy day today,
Yeah.
right? So socially mediated on automatic, guys, really important. And why is it important? Well, first of all, what do you think is an easier behavior to work on here?
Socially.
Why?
Because you can
Automatic,
assess.
it's like internal, then you have to like try. It's a very powerful thing. Doing it yourself.
Okay. What were you going to say, Nadine?
Because you can actually assess, whereas automatic, all you can really do is encourage them to learn the skill themselves.
Okay, yes, very true. And you guys are right on the money, saying socially mediated is an easier behavior to work on. And I think because we control, other people control when reinforcement's delivered or not. Right? Other people can control when reinforcement's delivered or not. It's very hard when I'm by myself for you guys to help intervene when I'm turning off that light switch. And think about it, maybe a problem behavior where I'm sitting there doing it 1,000 times a day. And I can't live a normal life because I'm stuck turning on and off the light switch all day long. No one's around to provide reinforcement. Why does that behavior continue? Well, I suspect it's probably automatically reinforced. Right? And it's a much more difficult behavior to work on, which you'll come to find in our field. Okay, so we talked about socially mediated and automatic. So we have an example here, socially mediated positive reinforcement. Give me an example of socially mediated positive reinforcement.
A waitress giving you a glass.
That was my example.
Right, cheater.
That was my example.
A waitress giving you a glass of water.
Okay, give me another one. Someone else.
Giving you that free time that you wanted. So reinforcing them with the iPad to listen to music.
My paycheck.
Okay. What was your example, Sue?
If they earned free time, then you give them the iPad that they wanted to listen to their music.
Okay, so a reward, right? Where they engage in some kind of behavior and we're delivering a reward like an iPad to use, and they have to go through us to gain access to the iPad? Absolutely. They have to go through the teacher to gain access to recess or maybe a special club or activity, right? Yeah, absolutely. And think about even as simple as our joke example. Me telling a joke to someone and I get their attention and they laugh and to me I find that reinforcing. You know what I mean? That is an example of socially mediated positive reinforcement. I'm getting attention from someone else. So always think about what we're talking about here is the consequence. And that's another problem I think some people fall in is they're thinking so much about the behavior instead of what the effects of the behavior are on the environment. So we talked about socially mediated positive reinforcement. Give me an example of automatic negative reinforcement.
I have like a VIP that plays with the water faucet. On and off.
And,
You have to try to get him away from it.
and why does he do that?
Wants to play with the water.
Okay, so would we say that's positive or negative? Is something being added or taken away as a consequence? I think your example is, we're getting closer, but I think that's might be positive reinforcement. So I love that example because it's gonna, what was it?
I take off my jacket because it's hot.
Yes. Yes. So think about And before we move on to that, let's think about Maria's example. In Maria's example, we have a VIP who's turning off and on the water, and they might like the sensory sounds or the feeling of the water, playing with the water. Well, to me, something is being added to the environment. Water, right? So in my mind, that would be automatic positive reinforcement, that something is being added. So don't think of positive and negative meaning something good or bad, right? It means something added or something is taken away as a consequence. So now with automatic negative reinforcement, and I'll give you a clue that there's an antecedent in place this person doesn't like.
Cleaning up the mess you made.
Or like a,
I know.
I mean, that could be a punishment.
or someone that's in like a water
I
chaotic
love
environment and they start skin picking, and then you're able to remove them from the environment and they stop. So the skin picking was a result of their environment, and it was self-stimulating and self-calming to them. Once they were out of that environment, they were able to self-calm without.
So now we're getting a little complicated because we have some socially mediated stuff going on there too. And
Yeah.
and Diego gave a great example. Did anyone hear what he said?
Keep your coat on.
So we have an aversive antecedent. I'm getting warm. My behavior is I take my coat off.
Wait.
I cool it. Something's being, and then me feeling hot is removed. It's not the coat being taken off. Well,
Wouldn't that be positive because you add coolness to your life?
so no, because and I was confused of this idea when I first learned it too. Think about when it's negative, there's always an antecedent that's aversive in negative reinforcement. So if that antecedent's in place that's something aversive and it's taken away when I engage in the behavior, that's negative reinforcement. So if I have a feeling of an itch on my arm, what do I do? What behavior do I engage in? And then what happens? The itch goes away. So the feeling of an itch is now removed. If I'm feeling hot, which I am a little bit, guys, to be honest, and I take off this flannel or whatever, and I'm now not, the heat is removed. I feel much better. Negative reinforcement. Don't confuse yourself.
He started with the antecedent, which was hot, so it would be positive or automatic positive reinforcement if he was cold and he added the jacket. Does that make sense? Because the cold, he made himself warm was the antecedent.
Right, because you added the jacket.
Correct. So do you see the difference? So the antecedent was he was hot, so he removed it, so that's the negative. But if he was cold and he added, it was positive. See the difference?
So you guys are taking positive and negative not in the sense
Correct.
of feelings or like emotions,
Yes.
as in literally the aspect of adding something. or
Literally
taking
think of
something.
math,
Okay.
positive and or add, subtract, add, subtract.
Yeah, it is something added to the environment or something is taken away. If I have a feeling of an itch on my arm, which is very not the best feeling for me at least, and I engage in a behavior of scratching it, and the itch is taken away, negative. Something is being taken away from the environment. And it's really important we know that. We're not going to get into it, but it's really important for us as clinicians to default our strategies to positive reinforcement. With positive reinforcement, we'll talk about it a little bit. Positive reinforcement causes behaviors to accelerate. Negative reinforcement, you just do the bare minimum to escape the adversive feeling. So when we're managing people, when we're working with VIPs, we don't want to be teaching them by negative reinforcement many times because our VIPs will do the bare minimum to escape. Think about the itch example that we keep bringing up. Do you sit there and continue to itch forever and ever and ever? No, as soon as that itch is gone, you're done with the behavior. Think about that for negative reinforcement, that it's only happens until that adversive effect is gone. Think about that tough boss, right? We'll do an OBM example. We have a tough boss, right? Our employees are likely to do the bare minimum to escape punishment from that boss. right? They'll just do the bare minimum for that person. Now we have a boss that leads by positive reinforcement. We have a boss that will give more based on a better job done. Are we likely to accelerate that behavior and do as much as we can to gain access to all that reinforcement? Probably. So when we're doing treatment interventions, we should always default to positive reinforcement because it's the only consequence that's going to accelerate the behavior to highest rates possible. Negative reinforcement, people only engage in behavior to escape it and then they're done with it. So do we have any questions about this? And it's something that we need to think about, and it's something that you can work with your BSCs about. But the hypothesis information is so important because it dictates our interventions. It'll dictate what we do next. Any questions or other examples or anything? Okay, so baseline. So we talked a lot about interventions. This is a graph we might make. And it's missing, oh no. It's missing a few things, my bad. So in the graph, what am I doing? So we're figuring out the function, but what else was a part of the assessment process? Getting what kind of data? Starts with a B. Baseline data, right? So I'm gathering baseline data at this time. Why is this important? It shows behaviors and how often they're happening now. Why else is it important? Yes, go ahead, Diego.
We can compare after we start working on a treatment if it is working or not because we have a baseline data.
Right, and here I have a little break in the data. And this indicates there has been a change. So now we teach this person to request. So we have this baseline period, and then we teach them to request. And now we're going to compare the data to see if our interventions were impactful in changing the behavior. Without this baseline phase, I don't know how my interventions, what kind of impact my interventions had. And there's one final piece here. Do you guys know what it is? Why we collect baseline data? Very good answer. Yeah. To tell us if we even need to do an intervention or not. So we have some examples here. And obviously our graphs never are this clean. They go up and down like this very easily. But we have one behavior that is accelerating. We have another behavior that's maintaining through time. And then we have one behavior that's showing a reduction over time. These are examples of consequences for behaviors. These two examples are what kind of effect are these behaviors experiencing? Yeah, reinforcement, positive or negative. These behaviors are becoming reinforced. This is an example of what reinforcement means. Reinforcement means a behavior is going to maintain through time or increase through time. That's all it means. Many times I ask people what reinforcement means, and they're like, it's something good. It's something nice. It could be those things, but it's not always those things. And maybe there's a couple out there that's having arguments, right? And they don't particularly like having arguments. They don't enjoy this process. They're miserable after. But by golly, when those antecedents are in place, they're engaging in these behaviors again and again. Why? Why would you say? Yeah, the effects of this argument, whatever's happening after the arguments is reinforcing. And it could be dealing with it could be like blowing off steam, right? When I'm really upset and uptight, I'm going to engage in this problem behavior because it's going to help me feel better. So we have healthy and unhealthy behaviors. But guys, this example right here is a behavior that's being reinforced. So when I see this during my baseline data, when I see this on my baseline data sheet, I'm going to know this is whatever's happening as a consequence is reinforcing the behavior, because these are examples of reinforcement. So now I can look back to my ABC chart and see the consequence section in my ABC chart. And if I did my assessment correctly, what's in the consequence is going to be my clue about what's maintaining this behavior. So if I see one of these two effects on the graph, I know that it is whatever consequence is for these behaviors is reinforcing, and they definitely need an intervention, a special intervention to help out. We have this other example here of a behavior that's naturally what? Decreasing. And that's the opposite of reinforcement. Like that, this is an example of a behavior that's becoming what? Extinct, or we use the word punished. Yes, exactly. And it doesn't mean we're doing anything mean to the person or doing anything like that. It's just an effect on the behavior. And we see that this behavior is being reduced over time. So if I didn't have, and this means that I don't need an intervention, what do I tell this family? Yes, keep doing what you're doing. It's working. You don't need a special intervention in this case. Without this baseline information, it's impossible for me to make that judgment call. Right? It's impossible for me to make that judgment call, whether we should move ahead with interventions. And think about interventions, behavior support plans, interventions, meetings. It's a lot of work. This is a lot of work that we put into to come up with a plan. Many times we might not be needing to do it if we have good functional behavior assessment, we have good data collection, and we've done the FBA process correctly. We will determine if behaviors are in need of interventions or not. Any questions? I believe that's the last slide. Oh, no, it's not. Recap. Collect data on the ABCs of behavior and complete the FBA. Indirect, direct. Determine the function of behavior. Hypothesis statement. Socially mediated, automatic reinforcement. Socially mediated or automatic reinforcement, right? We know what that means. Positive and negative. We know what that means. So I might have a problem behavior, socially mediated positive reinforcement. That means something is being added to the environment that's maintaining that behavior into the future. I tell jokes. I get a lot of laughs. I enjoy getting laughs. It's reinforcing for my behavior. I'm telling everyone jokes. I'm telling everyone that joke, right? And the one thing to consider about reinforcement, guys, is what's reinforcing to you is not necessarily what's reinforcing to other people. We all have our own unique learning history. Some things are, like our temperature example. Well, we all like to not be too hot or too cold. We all like to breathe air, right? That's a pretty good thing, right? So like that's something that's reinforcing in all of us, and we call those unconditioned reinforcers. We all like to eat food. We all like to take a drink when we're thirsty. So those things are automatically, I shouldn't use the word automatically. Those things are naturally reinforcing to all of us. But most other things, it's based on our learning history, whether they're reinforcing to our brain or not, reinforcing to our problem behaviors or not, or good behaviors or not. We're going to come up with a baseline during this time too. And we talked a lot about the baseline, why we need that baseline data. And then finally, we're going to develop a behavior plan based on the function, if needed. And I think that is the last slide, right, Shay? It keeps going. The fun's never over here. So guys, this is for BSCs, and this is the FBA summary report. So you guys as BSCs would fill out this form as a receipt that you guys completed the FBA process successfully and completely. You come back after you're doing this FBA process and you are filling in each one of these sections as you complete the FBA process. And at the end of it, you're going to turn it into us to show us that you completed the FBA process. Everything here, every time you go out during this process, you're meeting with the families, you're doing indirect, you're doing direct, this is where you put the information down in your FBA summary report. This is going to keep all the information here for you to review when you're ready to present to a BCBA or when you're ready to write your treatment plan. You have all this information outlined very nicely. You completed the indirect, the direct, record reviews. Everything here that we reviewed is going to be outlined on this FBA summary report. When you complete the summary report and you made that baseline graph, it's time maybe to develop a behavior support plan. There are times where we might, real quick, not want to wait to do this whole process and give interventions right away. What are those times, do you guys think? Yeah, if someone's engaging in severe problem behaviors and they're hurting themselves or others and they're at risk of all kind of problems, maybe police, maybe property destruction, maybe hurting themselves severely, we might not want to wait to do a lengthy baseline and FBA process. We may want to get on the phone with the BCBA, give them the information right away so we can start working on treatment interventions right away. So if you're dealing with a severe enough behavior, we may not want to go through this whole process before coming up with a behavior support plan. We might want to act right away. We might want to put interventions in right away to help this person. Any questions for me? That definitely is the last slide. Well, we have a reference. These are where I got the information. Any questions for me before we part ways today? Well, thank you very much for your participation. I hope you guys learned stuff.